The wind howled through the empty city streets, biting through layers of clothing and echoing off the concrete walls like a lonely song. Midnight had long passed, and most of the world had retreated into the warmth of home. Ethan, a tired night shift janitor with aching feet and a worn coat zipped up to his chin, exited the subway and walked briskly toward the bus shelter. The cold seemed to seep into his bones, but he was used to it. What he wasn't used to was what he heard next. A whisper and fragile, almost lost in the wind. I have nowhere to sleep. He stopped. For a second, he thought he imagined it. But when he turned, he saw her barely out of her teens, curled into herself like a wounded bird in the corner of the shelter. Her coat was too thin for the weather, and a tattered backpack sat between her knees, hugged tightly like it was the only thing she had left. Her voice had been calm, but her eyes told a different story, one of long nights, silent cries, and a desperate search for safety. Ethan stood there, unsure. He wasn't rich, he didn't have much to offer. But something about the girl's quiet vulnerability hit him in a place that had long been numb. Maybe it was the way she didn't beg or plead. Maybe it was how small she looked against the backdrop of a city that moved too fast to notice anyone like her. He cleared his throat. You hungry? She hesitated, eyes wide, as if kindness was something she hadn't encountered in a long while. Slowly, she nodded. I live a few blocks from here, he said, voice gentle. It's not much, but I've got some leftover soup. You can warm up for a bit. There was a long pause. Then, wordlessly, she stood and followed him. The apartment was nothing more than a small studio above a closed-down laundromat. The wallpaper peeled in places, and the radiator clicked like it was dying, but it was warm. She stood by the door, unsure if she should step all the way in. He ladled soup into a chipped bowl and handed it to her. She took it with both hands, like it might disappear if she let go. She ate slowly, carefully, as if each bite needed to last. You can take the bed, Ethan said after a while. She looked up, startled. No, I couldn't. You need it more than I do, he replied. Then he grabbed a pillow, laid a blanket on the hardwood floor, and settled down without another word. She stared at him. Something shifted in her expressions, something soft, something that had long been buried under fear and cold. They didn't talk much after that, but neither of them slept right away. In the quiet of the night, under the soft hum of the radiator, she finally spoke. I ran away, she said, her voice barely audible. The foster home. It wasn't safe. I've been on the street since last winter. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened. Shelters turned me away. She continued. Said they were full or I didn't have ID. I tried sleeping in hospitals, under bridges, even inside a library once. I'm so tired. You're safe here, Ethan said gently. At least for tonight. Tears welled in her eyes, but didn't fall. She turned away, pulling the blanket up to her chin. In the dark, she whispered, thank you. Morning came with the scent of coffee and the soft clinking of dishes. Ethan placed a clean towel, a fresh pair of socks, and a folded note on the small table. When she woke, he was getting ready for his shift. There's a women's center down on Oak, he said, handing her the note. My friend works there. Tell her Ethan sent you. She looked at him like she wasn't sure this was real. A week later, he saw her again outside that same center, standing tall, hair brushed, wearing clean clothes, and holding a folder of job applications. When she spotted him, she smiled and ran toward him. I slept in a real bed last night, she said, her voice cracking, and I didn't feel scared. He nodded, heartful. Sometimes, it doesn't take much to change a life, just someone willing to give up their bed, sleep on the floor, and offer a little warmth in a world gone cold. The apartment was small, just a single room with a sagging bed, a worn-out chair, and a tiny kitchen tucked into the corner. The kind of place most people overlooked, but to her it felt like a palace. The warmth alone was enough to make her eyes sting. Ethan moved about quietly, not wanting to overwhelm her. He didn't ask questions, didn't press for a name or a story. He simply opened a cupboard, found a can of soup, and poured it into a dented saucepan. As it heated, the scent filled the room, simple, familiar, comforting. Her hands trembled slightly as she held them out to the heat from the stovetop. When the soup was ready, he handed her a bowl with a spoon. She hesitated for a second, as if unsure whether to accept it. Then, with a soft thank you, she took it in both hands and sat on the edge of the chair. She tried to eat slowly, but it was clear she was starving. Her eyes stayed on the bowl, her shoulders hunched, her guard still up. Ethan sat on the bed, giving her space, pretending not to notice how quickly she was finishing each spoonful. He knew what pride looked like when it was trying to hide pain. When she was done, he stood up and quietly pulled a folded blanket from a crate beneath the bed. Without a word, he shook it open and laid it across the mattress, smoothing it out. Then he placed a small pillow at the head of the bed and took a step back. She looked up in alarm. "No, you don't have to do that," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "This is your bed." He turned to her with a half smile, already grabbing a second pillow for himself. "I know," he said softly. "It's okay." He dropped the pillow on the hardwood floor next to the bed, laid down a thin blanket, and sat beside it, unbothered. She stared at him, as if trying to make sense of the moment. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. The kindness felt foreign, like something from a forgotten dream. She didn't know what to say. No one had made a gesture like that in years. No one had chosen discomfort so that she could rest. Ethan didn't look for thanks or praise. He simply laid down on the floor, closed his eyes, and let the silence be a space of peace rather than awkwardness. The soft ticking of the old wall clock filled the room. She watched him for a long time before, finally lying down, still unsure if she deserved the comfort. Her eyes stayed open, tracing the ceiling, listening to his even breathing from below. She wasn't used to safety. But somehow, in that tiny apartment with chipped paint and mismatched furniture, surrounded by the scent of soup and the sound of quiet, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long, long time: safe. And that, more than the bed, the blanket, or the soup, was the real gift he gave her. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the old radiator and the occasional creak of floorboards adjusting to the cold night. The light from the street lamp outside slipped through the curtains in soft orange streaks, casting long shadows across the walls. Ethan lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling. His body was tired, but his mind wouldn't quiet down. He could hear her breathing slow, but not steady enough to be sleep. She was awake too. Minutes passed in stillness before her voice broke through the dark, fragile as glass. "I don't usually talk," she said. "Most people don't want to hear it." Ethan said nothing, just waited. "I was in foster care," she continued after a long pause. "The last home. He was supposed to protect me, but he didn't." Her voice cracked. "I left. I didn't even take anything, just walked out one day and never went back." Ethan turned his head slightly, watching the silhouette of her curled up on the bed. "I thought shelters would help, but most were full or only took families. Some just didn't believe me. One woman said I was too old to be a priority. I'm 19, she gave a short, bitter laugh. Too old for help, too young to survive out there. She swallowed hard before continuing. I've slept in hospital, waiting rooms, behind dumpsters, even in stairwells. You learn how to disappear. People don't see you when you're dirty and quiet. Ethan felt his throat tighten, but he still didn't interrupt. He knew the value of being heard without being judged. Some nights, I'd stay awake just so no one could take anything from me while I slept. Other nights I prayed I wouldn't wake up at all. Her voice faded, and for a moment there was only silence. Then Ethan whispered, "You matter, you know. No matter what they told you, no matter how they treated you, you're not invisible. To me." The words landed softly, but with the force of a wave. She didn't respond right away, but a quiet sniffle escaped, followed by the sound of a tear hitting the pillow. Then another. Her shoulders trembled. No one had ever said that to her, not in a way that felt real. She turned her face into the blanket, trying to muffle the sound, but Ethan heard it, the years of pain slipping out. Finally allowed a place to go. He stayed still, giving her space, knowing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be there. And in that quiet room, beneath the cracks in the ceiling and the weight of her truth, something shifted. Not everything was fixed, not everything was healed, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't carrying it alone. Morning arrived quietly, riding in on golden rays that slipped through the dusty blinds and gently spread across the room. The light touched everything: the peeling paint on the walls, the chipped edge of the kitchen counter, the pillow on the floor where Ethan had slept just hours before. He was already up, moving softly so as not to wake her. The soft hiss of the kettle filled the silence as he made coffee, the smell warm and grounding. He glanced over at the bed. She was still there, curled up beneath the blanket, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. for the first time. Since he'd met her, her face looked peaceful. The tightness in her brow was gone, and her hands were no longer clenched. She was sleeping like someone who finally believed no one would take anything from her in the night. Ethan looked away, blinking against the heaviness behind his eyes. He moved quietly around the small space, setting things out on the tabbouleh clean towel, a small stack of gently worn clothes, and next to them, a folded note. His handwriting was a little rough, but clear. There's a clean towel, some extra clothes, and if you need help, real help, I have a friend who runs a women's center. Her name is Monica. Tell her I sent you. You deserve more than just survival. He left the note where she could see it and sipped his coffee by the window. He didn't need to be there when she read it. This wasn't about thanks or recognition. It was about giving her something no one else had offered in a long time, a real choice. Not a demand. Not a condition, just a door, quietly left open. Behind him, she stirred. Her eyes blinked against the soft morning light as she looked around the room, safe, warm, unchanged from the night before. No threats, no traps, just kindness, quietly waiting. Her gaze landed on the note, and her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up and read the words. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just stared, as if absorbing the message fully, like it was trying to settle into the deepest part of her. She hadn't known what to expect when she followed him home the night before. A place to sit, maybe some food, nothing more. She certainly hadn't expected this. A bed, a warm blanket, someone who gave up his own comfort without question. And now, a path forward. A towel, clean clothes, a name, a place to go. She looked up and saw him standing quietly by the window, the light turning the edges of his figure into a silhouette. He didn't say anything, didn't push, but she could feel the quiet support in the room, like an arm around her shoulder without needing to touch. And for the first time in a long, long time, she felt something stirred deep inside her. It was hope. Not the kind that flickers and fades, but the kind that stays gentle, steady, and real. The sun was warm for the first time in days, casting a soft glow over the sidewalk outside the women's shelter. Ethan stood across the street, hands in his pockets, unsure why he had come. Maybe part of him just needed to know she was okay, that she had walked through the door he'd quietly left open. Then he saw her. She stepped out of the shelter, standing tall in clean, donated clothes. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her posture no longer hunched with fear or shame. In her hands, she clutched a folder, edges slightly bent, filled with job applications and possibilities. Her eyes scanned the street, and the moment they met they lit up. Without thinking, she ran across to him and threw her arms around him in a tight, tearful hug. He froze for a second, surprised, then wrapped his arms around her gently. I slept in a real bed last night, she said, her voice trembling, and I didn't feel scared. Her words hung in the air like a small miracle, simple, yet earth-shaking. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. He didn't need to ask more. The way she stood, the light in her eyes, it told him everything. He nodded, giving her a quiet smile. I'm proud of you. She pulled back, wiping at her eyes, but the joy on her face wouldn't leave. It wasn't just gratitude, it was strength. It was someone who had been broken, slowly stitching themselves whole again. Ethan didn't say much more. He never had to. His part hadn't been heroic. He hadn't swooped in with money or miracles. He'd simply seen her, listened, and made space for her in a world that so often turned its back. Sometimes, changing a life doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes, it's a warm bowl of soup, a quiet room, a blanket and a floor, a note that says you matter, and someone who means it. And in that moment, with sunlight on their backs and a new chapter just beginning, it was enough.